Something about the mid-city stoners never felt like the other neighborhoods around them. They didn't start off looking for trouble. They grew into it. Back in the early 1970s, Los Angeles was in the middle of a youth culture shift. Street kids were growing their hair out, listening to heavy rock, and smoking weed in the alleys behind Queen Anne Park. They called themselves stoners, not because they were hardened criminals, but because they were exactly what the name implied. From that loose group came the Mid-City Stoners, one of the earliest Chicano stoner gangs to form before the violence of the 1980s took hold. They repped the Rolling Stones logo, the tongue and lips, as their unofficial emblem. What started as long-haired teens sharing joints and beer at house parties in the Mid-Wilshire corridor slowly transformed into a territorial street gang. By the mid-70s, MCS had set roots near Queen Anne Park, just off Pico Boulevard and Crenshaw. Their earliest base included the Crenshaw Boys Clique, a group known for hanging at the park and around Olympic Boulevard. At that time, the area was a melting pot, Black, Latino, and Asian, but every year tensions crept higher. As the city changed, so did the stoners. By the early 80s, they spread east, toward Western Avenue, around 11th Street and Arlington. That zone would later become home to the 11th Street Locos, another MCS clique. Nearby, the Hoover Street Locos held down the blocks between Armour Avenue and Western. They shared corners and alleys with the Rolling 20 Bloods, one of the strongest black gangs in that section of South Central. The stoners weren't a massive gang, but they were tight and proud. They stayed Chicano to the core, Dickies, Pendletons, Lowriders, and that old-school stoner swagger. But as the crack era hit Los Angeles, peaceful coexistence ended. Cocaine and drive-bys changed everything. By the late 1980s, the mid-city stoners, the Rolling 20 Bloods, and Black P-Stones were all operating within a few blocks of each other. It was a powder keg. Old friendships from high school days disappeared as racial politics mixed with drug money. Police reports from 1990 to 1994 documented constant shootings in the corridor between Adams Boulevard and Washington. Detectives later said what started as minor disputes, stolen dope, disrespect on the street, turned into open war. During a 4-year stretch, 19 people were killed, 8 of them black civilians with no gang affiliation. The Mid-City Stoners were blamed for many of those deaths. Everything reached its breaking point in 1993 after the murder of Insane Wayne, a respected figure in the Rolling 20 Bloods. His killing sparked instant retaliation. That same night, a carload of Bloods lit up a corner where several stoners were hanging out. 4 members were hit. 1 died at the scene. From that moment, the truce between black and brown on those blocks was gone. Between 1993 and 1997, South Central became a war zone. Detectives working gang detail back then described nights where gunfire echoed from Washington Boulevard all the way down to Vermont. Civilians were caught in the crossfire almost weekly. On March 1997, Teaspoon from the Rolling 20 Bloods was gunned down on the 1400 block of 2nd Avenue. Within days, a Latino man was killed on Harvard Boulevard. A mistaken identity hit blamed on blood retaliation. 1 week later, 2 more Bloods were shot on South Adams. KD, a high-ranking member, died instantly. The 1993 to 1997 period marked the bloodiest chapter in mid-city stoner history. As the 90s closed out, MCS faced new enemies. To their west were the West Side Playboys, another Mexican-American gang expanding aggressively. To the north were MS-13 Normandy Locos, and to the south still lurked the Rolling 20 Bloods. By 1998, law enforcement and rival gangs alike were pressing hard on MCS. Members were being arrested in sweeps, older homies were aging out, and the streets were getting hotter. Queen Anne Park, once their symbolic heart, started to fill with new condos and redevelopment projects. Gentrification squeezed the set even tighter. While Los Angeles crackdowns were heavy, another front opened 30 miles south in Long Beach. Around 1990, MCS members from the city began migrating there, setting up a smaller branch known as the 19th Street Locos on the east side. Long Beach was already packed with enemies. East Side Longos, Barrio Pobre, and the Insane Crips controlled most of the landscape. Still, MCS carved out a foothold between 19th and 20th Street near Long Beach Boulevard, but relations with the black gangs never improved. The Long Beach Mid-City Stoners carried a heavy anti-Crip attitude. Police documents from 2006 to 2009 describe them as racially motivated offenders, viewing every black resident as a potential enemy. Their graffiti carried CK, meaning Crip Killer, On May 29, 2008 at 7:40 p.m., Randolph rode his bike alongside two friends, Bruce and Terry, near Locust Avenue. A green Honda swerved to block their path. Inside were two Latino males. One of them, Luis Sanchez, known to police as an MCS member, leaned out and opened fire 5 times. Terry caught a bullet in the shoulder. Randolph took one in the leg. Bruce barely escaped by sprinting across the street. The shooter sped off. Randolph later identified Sanchez in a photo lineup. When police picked him up the next day, he was calm. Officers who knew him from previous stops testified that he'd always carried himself like a stone-cold soldier. During interrogation, Sanchez admitted he was MCS and that his street name was Shy. He said he was riding with a homie named Dopey who told him, "Handle business." Sanchez also mentioned being shot himself months earlier by some blacks and vowed revenge. In the hospital, he told an officer straight up, "I don't like them. I'll take care of them." In court, the jury didn't hesitate. Luis Sanchez was convicted on 3 counts of attempted murder and hit with 15 years to life. Just one day later, May 30th, 2008, two brothers, Isaiah and Darnell, stood on the corner of 19th Street and Long Beach Boulevard waiting to cross. A Latino male pedaled up on a bike, asked, "Where you from?" and without pause pulled a revolver, shouting,
"Man, F-20s.
Before firing. Isaiah was hit in the shoulder, Darnell in the back. Both survived. The shooter, Luis Bazan, was arrested blocks away, still wearing the same white t-shirt and Dickies. Police later found gunshot residue on his hands and .22 caliber ammo at his house. He was convicted on 2 counts of attempted murder and sentenced to 80 years to life. Together, these cases highlighted how deeply racial violence had infected Long Beach. Detectives described the conflict as a war of perception, shooting someone simply for walking while black. By the early 2000s, MCS reappeared in Watts, this time near the Nickerson Gardens housing projects, the heart of bounty hunter Blood's territory, around 113th Street and Wadsworth Avenue. Most of the members lived in one small house known locally as the Stoner House. Neighbors called the cops weekly. The stoners would yell racial slurs at kids walking home from Lock High, brandish guns, and let their pit bulls loose just to intimidate people. It wasn't gang warfare, it was racial terrorism. On December 21st, 2012, a group of about 15 black students from Lock High School walked past the Stoner House. One stoner lifted his shirt, showing a pistol. Most of the students left, but a few refused to be punked. They regrouped with older homies from the bounty hunters, among them Shannon, Dupree, and Ewayne. Ewayne grabbed a bike, pedaled toward the stoner block, and confirmed the stoners were still outside. Moments later, he returned, loaded up a .45 with Dupree and Shannon, and headed back. As they reached 113 and Wadsworth, Ewayne fired multiple rounds across the street. When police arrived, they found Eddie Berto, an MCS member, dead in the street with a head wound. Ballistics matched 3 9mm casings to a single weapon. Witnesses said the shooter never flinched, just emptied the clip and rode off. Ewayne Barry, Dupree, and Shannon from the bounty hunters were later convicted of second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, receiving 40 years to life each. After that, the train line clique collapsed. The bounty hunters made sure of it. By 2014, the Stoner House was abandoned, its windows boarded up. Today, the Mid-City Stoners aren't the force they once were. Law enforcement pressure, internal feuds, and demographic change have shrunk them down to small, scattered crews. Some members still operate near Long Beach and pockets of Mid-City Los Angeles, but they keep a low profile. Gang injunction zones, rising rent, and LAPD's Gang Enhancement Unit hit them harder than rivals ever could. But for the older generation, those who remember Queen Anne Park, the garage parties, and the transition from peace to warfare, the name MCS still carries weight. Their story mirrors the evolution of Los Angeles gang culture, from teenage rock fans getting high behind a park wall to soldiers trapped in a decades-long cycle of revenge. The same streets that raised them ended up swallowing them whole. That's the full breakdown. I'd ask you to please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell for notifications. More stories coming soon. Until then, watch your step and respect the streets.